I gave my life to my parents, then discovered they called me a burden behind my back. It was Christmas Eve when it all crumbled. My hands were shaking as I held the small piece of paper in front of me, my eyes scanning the words over and over again like they would somehow change. But they didn't. They stayed the same, sharp and cruel in their simplicity. Maybe next year she'll do something useful with her life. That's what they wrote. In the family group chat. About me. I don't even remember why I opened the group messages that night. I was just cleaning up after dinner, brushing the last few breadcrumbs off the counter while my parents and my younger siblings laughed in the living room, sipping wine and exchanging gifts. I hadn't joined them yet because I'd been cooking all day. I made the roasted turkey, the mashed potatoes, the stuffing, the cranberry sauce from scratch, the glazed carrots, and even the pecan pie my dad always loved. I didn't sit down once from noon until that moment. I was wearing a red apron smeared with gravy and flour, and even though I was exhausted, I felt a tiny spark of pride. At least they would feel cared for. So when I took a 5-minute break to check my phone, it wasn't because I expected anything special. I knew they'd all forgotten about me in there. Again. What I didn't expect was to see a group chat bubble at the top of the screen Family Christmas with a message that had clearly not meant to include me. My mom had sent it. And she wasn't even trying to hide it. Hope she doesn't burn the pie like last year. Honestly, I don't know how she's still single. She just doesn't try. Then my sister chimed in. Seriously. Every year she shows up with her martyr complex and expects applause for making dinner. Try doing something with your life instead of playing house in mom's kitchen. Then my dad simply let her think she's helping. It's less dramatic that way. I stood there, frozen, my phone trembling in my grip. The gravy on my apron felt sticky now. My eyes were burning, and for a moment, I thought it was the onions I'd been chopping earlier. But no, it was the tears, sharp and hot, pressing against the back of my eyes like a dam about to burst. I didn't cry, though. I couldn't not while they were still in the other room, laughing. I put the phone down on the counter and stared blankly at the sink full of dishes. For a moment, all I could hear was the clinking of glasses from the living room and my sister's shrill laugh. I had spent every Christmas for the last 10 years doing this. Cooking, cleaning, smiling politely when they gave me soap gift sets, or dollar store mugs while they handed each other iPads and perfume sets and cash envelopes. They never said thank you. Not once. But this was different. This was them saying, in plain words, what I had feared for years. I was a joke to them, a burden. A woman who gave up her 20s and 30s taking care of her aging parents so they wouldn't have to hire help, who stayed behind when her friends moved on, who skipped vacations and dinners out and dating because your dad needs help with the bank paperwork or your mom's got her doctor's appointment. And in return, this. I didn't go into the living room that night. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, surrounded by the warmth of the oven and the hum of the dishwasher, and I stared at the paper snowflakes I had taped to the window just hours before. That's when it hit me. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be useful to people who didn't even see me as a person, only as a tool, a servant, a silent daughter who didn't make waves. But something shifted in me that night. It was quiet at first, just a whisper of defiance in the pit of my stomach. I didn't know what I was going to do. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure, I wouldn't stay silent anymore. I think the saddest part wasn't even what they said in the group chat. It was that, deep down, I wasn't surprised. It hurt like hell, yes. But shocked? No. Because I had spent most of my life training myself not to expect love, just hoping for the smallest hint of appreciation. And even that was rare. When I was younger, I used to tell myself that if I could just be more helpful, more patient, more available, they'd notice me. They'd love me in the way they loved my younger sister, Amanda. Amanda was always the bright one, the pretty one, the one everyone said had potential. And me? I was the dependable one, the one who cleaned up after dinner, who babysat without complaint, who missed sleepovers because mom isn't feeling well or your sister has a piano recital. I was always second, sometimes third, but never first, never chosen. In high school, I was the one who walked to school while Amanda got rides. When I asked for new shoes, I was told to make do. When Amanda wanted ballet lessons, the money was magically there. It wasn't just money. It was how they looked at her, with pride, with softness. The way my dad used to light up when Amanda came home from college, he'd hug her so tightly, like the world stopped for her. When I came home after pulling double shifts at the local diner to help pay the bills, he barely glanced up from the TV. I wasn't jealous. I was tired. Tired of trying to earn something that should have been mine without having to beg for it. My 20s were a blur of compromise. While Amanda studied abroad in Paris, one stayed back to take care of my mother during her recovery from surgery. I remember sleeping on the floor next to her bed, waking up every 2 hours to check her medication. No one asked me to, but no one else offered either. When my father lost his job, I canceled my plans to move out and sent in most of my paycheck instead. Just until we get back on our feet, he said. That just turned into 6 years. I missed weddings, vacations, concerts. Friends stopped inviting me. They assumed I was always busy, and I was, but not in a way that built my life. I was busy keeping theirs running. And through it all, I told myself, they're your parents. They love you. Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe they just don't know how to show it. So I kept giving. On holidays, I bought the gifts. Not the flashy ones, but thoughtful ones. A mug with Amanda's favorite quote. A cookbook my dad had once mentioned in passing. A silk scarf for Mom, because she used to wear one just like it in her wedding photo. They never remembered what I gave them, but I remembered what they gave me. A generic notepad, expired lotion, or worse, nothing at all. There was this one birthday I turned 30. I came downstairs thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd planned something. A dinner, a cake. But the kitchen was quiet. Amanda was visiting, and they'd gone out to brunch. No one told me. When I asked, they blinked at me like I was the one who forgot something. Oh, was that today? Mom asked, frowning. I thought your birthday was next week, Amanda added. I laughed it off. I always did. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was an adult now, and birthdays were just days. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, I didn't matter. Not to them. At least, not as a person. Just as a helper. A body who cooked, who ran errands, who cleaned up behind everyone else's messes. And despite all of it, I stayed. Because I thought, one day, they'd wake up and realize how much I loved them. That I had given up everything to be what they needed. But Christmas Eve changed that. That night, when I saw the words in that group chat calling me a burden, calling my life meaningless, I realized something that shook me to my core. They didn't just overlook me, they resented me. They saw my help as weakness, my sacrifices as failures, my loyalty as laziness. To them, I wasn't the daughter who stayed behind to care for her family. I was the one who never did anything with her life, and that broke something inside of me. Not in the way things break and shatter, but in the way a lock turns. I stopped needing them in that moment. I stopped hoping they'd see me. I began to see myself. I didn't confront them right away. There were no shouting matches, no midnight breakdowns. Instead, I folded the pain up neatly, like a worn-out sweater I'd worn for too long, and placed it in the back of my mind. That night, I stood in the kitchen and stared out the window while they laughed in the living room, unaware of what I had read, unaware that something inside me had quietly snapped. The next morning, I didn't make breakfast. I didn't offer to drive Mom to her appointment. I didn't refill the coffee pot or tidy up the living room. Instead, I sat with my tea, scrolling through job boards. Not for them, for me, they noticed, of course. Not the tea, not the silence, but the absence of service. Are you feeling okay? My dad asked, squinting over his paper like it was out of character for me to be still. I'm fine, I replied. And that was it. I didn't owe them more. That week, I began redrawing the lines. I stopped saying yes out of guilt. I stopped going out of my way to anticipate every little need they had before they voiced it. I let silence fill the spaces where I used to apologize for existing. When Amanda texted asking me to babysit her twins while she had a much-needed spa day, I replied simply, I can't. No explanation. No lie about being busy. Just the truth. I'm not available to sacrifice myself anymore. She didn't take it well. Wow, okay, she typed back. Didn't think you'd be so selfish. It's just a few hours. I didn't respond. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain my boundaries. Meanwhile, something inside me began to shift subtly but steadily. I started journaling again. I went for walks alone. I applied for a part-time administrative role at a local community center, just to dip my toe into a life outside of them. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. One night, I overheard Amanda talking to Mom in the kitchen. I wasn't eavesdropping, not exactly. I was just passing by. I don't know what's gotten into her, Amanda was saying. She's been so distant lately. Maybe it's menopause or something. They laughed. My mother sighed. She's probably mad because we didn't get her anything nice for Christmas. She's always been sensitive. Sensitive? That word again. They said it like it was a flaw, like having feelings made me weak. But I didn't cry. I didn't barge in to defend myself. I stood there, behind the wall, letting the last illusions fall away. I saw them clearly for the first time, not as people who loved me poorly, but as people who never really saw me at all. That weekend, I cleaned out my closet. I packed up my things in boxes, not because I had a plan to leave yet, but because I wanted the option. I even created a secret bank account, just a small one. I moved a few $100s I had saved into it. It felt radical, almost like I was stealing from them, even though it was my money. That's how deeply the guilt had been embedded. They noticed the shift soon enough. "Why are you being weird lately?" my dad asked one evening, looking up from his recliner. "You used to laugh more." "I used to try harder," I replied, sipping my tea. He didn't like that answer, but I didn't care. Amanda started sending passive-aggressive messages. "Are you okay? You've been so cold lately," followed by, "Maybe you're depressed. You should talk to someone." I wanted to text back. I did. I talked to myself, and for once, I listened. But I didn't, I just left her on read. And then something strange happened. I stopped feeling guilty. I thought guilt would claw at me like it always had, but instead, I felt lighter. Every time I said no, every time I chose myself over their expectations, I felt a little more like a person and a little less like a ghost. One afternoon, while cleaning the garage, I found a box labeled old cards. Inside were birthday cards, notes, and letters. None of them were mine. All of Amanda's baby shower cards, her graduation notes, her wedding RSVPs, neatly stacked, tied with a ribbon. I flipped through them, my hands trembling. Then I looked up and saw a small torn envelope shoved in the corner. It was addressed to me from a childhood friend who had moved away. My mom had never given it to me. I stared at the date 2007. I was 17. I never knew she had written me. She'd been my best friend. She had promised to stay in touch. I sat on the floor and cried, not because of the lost letter, but because of how much of my life had been filtered through someone else's idea of what I was allowed to have, what I was worth. I wasn't angry yet, not fully, but I was building something inside. A resolve, a quiet fire. They still thought I'd never leave, that I'd always be there to clean up their messes and keep the peace. But they didn't know what I had planned. I didn't slam the door when I left for work that Monday. In fact, I closed it so gently it didn't even make a sound. That's how it started, my silent rebellion. I had landed a part-time job at a small nonprofit. Nothing big, just 20 hours a week assisting with admin and event prep. But it was mine. It paid just enough to start dreaming. I didn't tell them. I'd leave in the morning, say I was volunteering, or running errands. They didn't question it. They never cared enough about the details, as long as dinner was on the table and their laundry was folded. But suddenly, dinner wasn't ready when they expected. The laundry started piling up. Groceries weren't magically restocked. My mother asked, "Are you feeling okay lately?" "You've been distant. I'm fine," I replied, and smiled. A soft, cold smile that said, "I'm no longer yours to command." They started to notice the changes. One night, Amanda stopped by, unannounced as always. She walked in like she owned the place, dropped her kids in the living room, and said, "Can you keep them for an hour? I need to run a quick errand." I looked up from my laptop and said, "No, I'm busy." She blinked, like I had just spoken in another language. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no," I said, calmly. "I didn't agree to watch them." She huffed and grabbed the twins. As she stormed out, she muttered under her breath, "God, you really are becoming useless." I didn't even flinch, because the words didn't stick anymore. Not when I'd already heard worse. Not when I'd already seen what they really thought of me in their private little chat. Later that night, I printed out a copy of my bank transactions. every monthly transfer I'd made to my parents, every utility bill in my name, every receipt I'd covered just this once that had somehow become always. I placed them in a manila envelope and tucked it into a drawer. Not for them, for me. Proof. A paper trail. A shield. They still thought I was playing housekeeper, playing nurse, playing daughter, but I had already begun preparing for my exit. I opened a savings account in a new bank. I started looking at shared rentals on Craigslist, just to see what was out there. There was a woman 2 towns over, around my age, renting out her spare room. She was quiet, a book editor, looking for a housemate who didn't bring chaos. That sounded like heaven. One night, I stayed late at the nonprofit. We were prepping for a winter event. I was stringing fairy lights on folding chairs when the program director, a kind woman named Tara, said, "You're really good at this. At what? Organizing, leading, staying calm. I mean it. You should be in charge of something." I almost cried right there, because no one had said anything like that to me in years. Later, I found myself in the break room with her, sipping tea. She looked at me and said gently, "I don't know what's going on at home, but you don't look like someone who gets seen much." And I broke, not into tears, but into words. Not the full story, just bits. Enough to feel human again. She listened, and that night, for the first time, I felt seen. When I came home, Mom was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed. "You're home late," she said. "I had work. You could have told me. Would it have mattered?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. I walked past her calmly. The next day, I got a group text from Amanda. It was a meme, something stupid. But then she wrote, "Hey, maybe we should do a family meeting soon. There's been some tension." "Might be good to talk," Mom chimed in. "Yes. Especially about responsibilities. Some of us are falling behind." Then Amanda again, and I heard someone's been keeping secrets. I read the messages in silence. Then I muted the group. That was the day I blocked them from accessing my calendar. Yes, they had access. For years, I had synced everything: doctor's appointments, errands, holidays, so they'd know when I was free. I had allowed it. And now I was undoing it. One small freedom at a time. The following weekend, I went to see the woman renting the room. Her name was Eliza. Her apartment was warm, filled with the smell of cinnamon and books and quiet. She had a rescue cat named Opal who sat in my lap like I'd been hers all along. "It's yours if you want it," she said. I looked around and said, "I do." I paid the deposit that night. When I got home, Amanda was in the living room with Mom and Dad, sipping wine like it was her throne room. "Where have you been?" she asked. "Out," I said. "With who?" "Someone who doesn't think I'm a burden." Silence. I walked to my room and closed the door. They still didn't know what was coming. They said they wanted a family meeting. I almost laughed when I read the message. Amanda sent it in the group chat, clearly the ringleader once again. "Let's have a calm conversation on Saturday afternoon. No drama, just honesty." I knew better. But I said yes. Not because I wanted to explain myself, but because I was ready. Saturday came. I arrived 10 minutes early, holding nothing but a manila folder under my arm. I wore all black, not out of mourning, but because it made me feel solid. I didn't want to disappear this time. The living room was already set up like an interrogation scene. Amanda sat with her arms crossed, a smug look that screamed she thinks she's in trouble. Mom and Dad flanked her, looking like the jury. Even Aunt Linda was there, clutching a mug of tea she didn't drink. I stood. I didn't sit. Amanda began. "Of course she did. You've been acting off lately," she said. "We're concerned." Concerned. That word again. The one they used when I didn't serve their needs fast enough. Mom added, "You've been distant and rude. And we don't understand what's going on." I took a breath. Then I opened the folder and placed it on the table. Inside, 3 years' worth of financial records. Every rent payment I had made. Every utility bill I had paid in full. Grocery receipts. Birthday gifts. Emergency loan transfers to Amanda and her husband. Car maintenance for Dad. Medication costs for Mom. Every dime. I didn't say a word as Amanda flipped through them. When she reached the page where her own Venmo history showed 5 emergency loans in 1 year, none of them ever paid back, she paled. Mom looked like she'd seen a ghost. Dad shifted uncomfortably. I finally spoke. "For over a decade, I gave you everything I had. Time, money, energy, my youth. I stayed when I could have gone. I helped when you barely noticed. And this, I tapped the folder. This is proof that I was never a burden. Silence. I turned to Amanda. You called me a leech in the group chat. Her mouth opened, then closed. Mom whispered, You weren't supposed to see that. I laughed. Quietly. No, I wasn't. But I did, and it showed me everything I needed to know. I pulled out the last page, a printed copy of my new lease with Eliza. I slid it across the table. I'm moving out next week. The spare room is already paid for. I've already packed half my things. You can't just leave like this, Amanda snapped. Who's going to help with Mom's appointments? Dad's prescriptions? The house needs maintenance. Not my problem anymore. I said it calmly. So calm, it cut deeper. You think you raised a servant, but what you really raised was someone who finally learned to say no. Aunt Linda tried to intervene. But honey, family goes through rough patches. You don't just walk away. I'm not walking away. I'm walking toward peace. Amanda looked furious now. You think this is noble? Abandoning your family? You abandoned me the moment you laughed behind my back and called me useless. I stood taller. And guess what? I'm not alone anymore. I took out one last photo, a picture I'd snapped with Eliza and Opal on her couch, smiling, wine glasses in hand. This is my new family. A woman who offered me kindness and quiet. A cat who curls up beside me instead of hissing. A space where I'm not the punchline. You're being dramatic, Mom said sharply. I learned from the best, I replied. All those years of watching you perform grief over sacrifices you never made. Amanda slammed her hand on the table. So what now? You just cut us off? No, I said. You did that the day you decided my worth was only in what I could provide. I picked up the folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked to the door. Dad stood up suddenly. Wait, he said. You really won't come back? I looked at him, really looked. And for once, I saw fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing the comfort I provided. I'm not coming back, I said, because I never belonged here to begin with. And I walked out. The air outside felt different, lighter. The moment I stepped off the porch, I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I just breathed. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the fallout to hit. I hadn't blocked them, but I didn't answer their calls either. I let the texts pile up. Amanda sent walls of accusations. Mom resorted to guilt. Dad sent a message that simply read, Are you really doing this to us? Yes, I was. The first few days in Eliza's guest room were strange. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for some emotional storm to roll in and flatten me. But it never came. Not in the way I expected. Instead, there was stillness. Quiet mornings with coffee and no one criticizing how I looked. Late nights watching shows I picked, curled up with Opal. Laughter that didn't sting. Conversations that didn't revolve around favors or complaints. Eliza didn't ask anything of me except that I rest. I had to relearn what peace felt like. And just when I thought the dust had settled, the consequences for them began to show. Amanda's husband called me something he never did. He sounded sheepish. I didn't know about the money you gave us, he admitted. She told me it was a bonus from work. Of course she did. I'm not looking to fight, I told him. I just want distance. He sighed. Well, you've got it. Amanda's a mess right now. Her card got declined yesterday and she flipped out in the store. Said something about you freezing her transfers? I had. Quietly, without warning, I'd revoked my access to the family joint account I had funded for emergencies. I'd let it sit with a balance of exactly 0. I also unsubscribed from every auto payment I had set up in their name. The electric bill, their phone plan, the groceries I had delivered every Thursday like clockwork. They noticed. Oh, did they notice? Mom called crying one evening, just as I was settling into a warm bath. I watched her name flash across my screen and disappear again. No voicemail. 2 days later, she texted, It's so cold in here without heat. You used to care. I didn't respond. The irony was bitter and sharp. I used to care so much it nearly killed me. Now that I cared about myself for the first time, they called it cruelty. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, old bank records, insurance claims in my name for services I never used. The file grew thick. Not for revenge, but protection. Meanwhile, I began to live. I picked up a few extra shifts at a local bookstore, small, quiet work that paid little but gave me joy. Eliza would meet me after, and we'd grab takeout, gossiping about silly things like her dating life or my plans for redecorating my corner of her guest room. It was the first time in years someone asked me, "What do you want for dinner?" and actually meant it. One Sunday, I went hiking with a small group of coworkers. I turned off my phone entirely for the first time in, I couldn't remember how long. When I turned it back on, I had 17 missed calls, 10 from Amanda, 4 from Mom, 3 from a number I didn't recognize. The unknown number left a voicemail. "Hi, this is Jenna from Westfield Credit Union. We're calling in regard to some recent financial activity under your name." I froze. I called back. After verifying my identity, the woman on the other end of the line told me that someone had tried to open a line of credit using my information. "Not new fraud, linked fraud. Looks like it stems from a shared account," she said. "Your name is still connected to a family account used for multiple applications." My hands shook. I had cut off the money, but they were still using my name. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. Eliza went with me. I explained everything, how I had been listed as a co-signer on utilities, loans, even Amanda's failed business account. I hadn't signed anything in years, but my name was used repeatedly. The lawyer looked through the documents, slowly nodding. "You have a strong case," she said. "It'll take time, but we can sever all legal and financial ties." I felt something stir in me. Not anger, power. The kind of power you get when you finally realize you are no longer anyone's puppet. That night, I drafted a formal letter. Not an apology, not a reconciliation, a statement of independence. I sent it via certified mail to my parents' home and to Amanda's address. In it, I laid out every financial record, noted the upcoming legal proceedings, and included one final message. "You called me a burden, but you forgot that I was also your foundation. From this point forward, you will stand on your own, or you will fall without me." I used to believe love meant sacrifice. Now I know real love doesn't demand that you disappear to be worthy. It's been nearly a year since I walked away. The lawsuits settled quietly. My name was cleared from all their debts. My credit slowly recovered, and the lawyer helped me sever every remaining financial tie. Amanda fought it, of course, claimed I owed the family, that I was selfish, that I was punishing them. But when the documents laid bare the years of misuse, the judge didn't need convincing. She cried in court. "I didn't. My parents didn't show up at all. They sent a letter. It wasn't an apology, just a plea for forgiveness, for the sake of family." I folded it neatly and placed it in a box I no longer opened. I moved into a small studio apartment above a coffee shop a few blocks from the bookstore. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine alone. I painted the walls sage green, hung up art I'd never been allowed to buy, got a second-hand couch that creaked and a teapot that whistled like a stubborn bird every morning. I adopted a second rescue cat, yes. Opal got a little sister. Her name is Fern. They sleep curled together on the windowsill, unbothered by the noise of the city below. I started writing again, something I gave up when I was working triple shifts to pay the electric bill back home. Nothing serious, just thoughts, fragments. But it felt like discovering a language I forgot I spoke. And somewhere in that quiet, a strange thing happened. I stopped missing them. Not just my family, I stopped missing being needed. Because for the first time, I was choosing myself not out of spite, not as revenge, but as a quiet declaration of worth. I joined a little book club, said yes to dinner invites, said no when I didn't feel like going. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped justifying rest. I started living. One day, Eliza and I were walking through the farmer's market. She turned to me suddenly, holding a bunch of wildflowers. "You look different," she said. "How so?" "Lighter. Like someone finally put the weight down." I smiled. Because she was right. I still get texts from Amanda, though less now. Most go unanswered. My mom tried to call once on my birthday. I let it ring. I watched the name flash and fade. There was a time that would have broken me. But now I protect my peace like it's sacred. I don't wish them harm. I don't wish them back. They taught me something I'll never forget. That being needed isn't the same as being loved. And just because you were born into a family doesn't mean you're obligated to let them destroy you. Some nights, I sit on the balcony with Opal in my lap and Fern at my feet, sipping tea, watching the world hum softly. I think about the years I gave away. I think about how long it took me to realize I was enough without proving, without earning, without serving. And I think about that word they used, burden. Funny, how someone can carry you for years and you never notice until they finally set you down and you realize you never walked alone. I wasn't the burden, I was the backbone. And now? Now I walk on my own with nothing and no one on my shoulders but the sky. Final thoughts to the viewer. If you've ever felt like the one who gave everything and got nothing back, please know this. You are not the burden. You are the light. And sometimes, walking away is the bravest, kindest thing you can do for them and for yourself.